Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board. We have admitted everyone from the waiting room in Zoom, and we're welcoming folks here at the Visalia Convention Center. We're now recording to the cloud.
Okay, thank you so much, Santiago. Welcome, everyone. The board is now reconvening for day 2 of our 2-day board meeting, which started yesterday. We did roll call yesterday, so I will just acknowledge from the board who here is present. We have board member Broad joining us from Sacramento. Here in Visalia, we have board member Flores, board member Lightstone, and I believe that we may have board member Hall joining us a little bit later today. We will see. Also present today from our staff is our executive secretary, Santiago Avila Gomez, who is our point person for all technical issues. And I want to extend a huge thank you to him for help us set up. Just a few housekeeping matters. We do have Spanish interpretation both here in the room as well as on the Zoom. If you're here in the room, please go to the back and you can pick up one of the headsets, and our wonderful interpreters from Linguistica are waving their hands for that. And then if you are on Zoom, please go to the bottom of your screen, go to the interpretation button and pick Spanish if you would like to be on the Spanish channel. I'll take a moment and let Santiago relay that information as well for the Spanish channel.
It's handled as Spanish. Oh, you're right. Buenas tardes y gracias por acompañarnos hoy en nuestra junta. Tenemos hoy servicio de interpretación por vía Zoom. Hacia abajo de su pantalla, por favor, encuentre el glóbulo que dice interpretación y escoja su idioma. Aunque vaya a escuchar en inglés, por favor, escoja inglés porque le va a dar nuestras voces más claramente. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Santiago. We will now start with several business items as outlined on our agenda, and then we'll head into our informational panel. Depending on the speakers, we will look to take probably a 10-minute break sometime between 3 and 3:30, just give people room to stretch their legs and get a breather. We do have limited capability to manage audio quality of the meeting. So if you're in the audience, we ask that you please try and keep your voices down, and then on the for those participating on Zoom, please have your device on mute. We'll do our best to ensure that everyone can hear all of our speakers today. We may have some technical challenges during the panel, but we are going to try and troubleshoot those for those participating on our Zoom. Our first agenda item is the chair's report. Just a couple of items. One, I want to note for those of us that are here in Visalia and in the Valley, we have a Visalia open house reception at our ALRB office tonight. All are welcome. The reception is from 5:30 to 7:30 at our address at 1642 West Walnut Avenue. And if you go on any of our social media handles on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter or LinkedIn, you can see more information. We'd love to meet you, have you get to know the staff, meet our general counsel, our regional office staff, and the board members and myself here today. So all are welcome. We a little less than a year ago did a major renovation to that office and would love to show it off and just get to meet members of the community. I also want to extend deep gratitude to Lali Moreno and her husband Victor for organizing this conference and allowing us to use this space here at the Visalia Convention Center today. We are here a day ahead of the 20th annual Farm Worker Women's Conference, a huge event, and or 25, is that right, Lucia? Sorry, apologies. The theme is Fiesta to celebrate this milestone anniversary, and I'm so excited to be here and get to hear the presentations along with, I believe, 1,500 other attendees. So it's a beautiful space, and I'm just so grateful for the welcome that we got from the organizers. It's really impressive, so I'm excited to see it tomorrow. And then lastly, I'll note we're excited, the ALRB is excited once again to participate in the annual farm worker breakfast in El Centro on December 1st. We'll have staff there. And for my colleagues on the board, we have our staff have set up a wish list of items that we can give to attendees things like gloves and water bottles and whatnot. And so I'll be sending a link around so we can help put some items on that wish list and give some out to all of our farm workers who do so much for us in the middle of the night. It's quite an experience. Next, that concludes the chair's report. Our next agenda item is the executive officer's report on elections, unfair labor practice complaints, and hearings, which will be presented by our executive officer, Santiago.
Thank you. For today's report, I'll be covering board actions since our last public board meeting where this report was given was November 1st. Since that date, a series of administrative orders have been issued, 7 to be exact. And by the way, this report, as well as other documentation, is found on the ALRB's website in the meetings tab. You can find past meeting video recordings, as well as the minutes and various reports. For today's report, there was Zabala Farms of Salinas, LLC, and that's ALRB admin order number 2023-10, that issued on November 3rd. The next is DMB Packing Corp, doing business as the Damari Company, and that's an ALRB admin order number 2023-11, issued on November 3rd. The next, Garwin Farming Inc., 2023 ALRB admin order number 2023-12-P. The P designates the order as a precedential order, and that issued on November 14th. And the next 4 orders also issued yesterday, November 14th, and they all relate to the same issue as the precedential order, and that was a filing of a motion by Garwin Farming relating to bankruptcy proceedings and a claim for an automatic bankruptcy stay. Again, 2023-12P is the precedential order, followed by Garwin Farming Inc., ALRB admin order number 2023-13, Garwin Farming Inc., 2023, ALRB admin order number 2023-14, UFW ALRB admin order number 2023-15, relating to the request for an automatic stay also. And then finally, UFW ALRB admin order number 2023-16. And as mentioned, it also issued yesterday. All of those admin orders that issued yesterday are pending before the board, technically, as they are in the period for a party to seek reconsideration. And in addition, Norman's Nursery Inc. is pending the general counsel's request for subpoena enforcement. And Zabala Farms of Salinas is also currently pending before the board, wherein the regional director requested to seek enforcement pursuant to Labor Code Section 1160.8. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions about it. Again, the report is found on the website under the meetings tab.
Thank you very much, Santiago. Our next agenda item is the litigation report. We do not have an update today, so we will turn to our general counsel's report with our general counsel, Julie Montgomery, who will be joining us up here.
U.S. Department of Labor. And I actually got a really nice email from them really complimenting our staff on that presentation, thanking us. So it's just a really good collaboration that we have together with the U.S. Department of Labor. We're training them, they're training us, so that we can become more aware of what the resources are, so that we can make more effective referrals for farm workers when they have issues that can be handled by that agency. We've also been hosting office hours in different rural communities throughout the state where it's harder for workers to access us in our offices. So we have an increased presence out and about in other regions, and Santa Maria is a really great example. We've been hosting regular office hours at the nonprofit cause over there, and we have a staff person going there every week. We also did an interview on Raíz Informativa podcast hosted by the Ventura County Farm Worker Resource Program, which is in Oxnard. And I believe our regional director presented on that podcast. And we also provided a virtual Spanish training to community-based organization Mujeres en Acción in Monterey County. And participated just yesterday, our staff was at a wage clinic hosted by the California Labor Commissioner in the city of Santa Maria, which is in Santa Barbara County. And that was also co-hosted with MICOP, which is the, I think it's Mixteco Indígena, can't remember the entire acronym, but it's a Mixteco community-based organization. And then in the Visalia region, we provided we are providing tomorrow a training for a community-based organization in Coachella called TODEC, and we're presenting on the ALRB and a lot of rights and remedies available to workers. And the other week, we also were interviewed on Radio Bilingüe program and talked about a recent settlement that we achieved in the Valley involving Sun Pacific farming. And then tomorrow, we also have staff presenting at the Farm Worker Women's Conference right here where we are. So that's just a brief overview of some of the offices work, or our regional offices work, and just want to give a shout out to everyone who is working hard on the ground and getting word out to our farm worker community to make sure that people have access to our services and know that we are available and ready and willing to help when they have a need. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Our next agenda item is a joint presentation by both General Counsel Montgomery as well as my colleague, board member Cynthia Flores. The U.S. Department of Labor has recently published draft regulations impacting the H-2A program and making numerous changes to increase transparency and worker protection, as well as address issues with workers' rights. They're in their public comment period, and I was very pleased that my colleague joined several others on our staff, as she'll explain, to analyze the comments and make recommendations. And those comments will be available soon on USDOL's website. I don't believe they've been formally submitted yet, but she's here to discuss some of those regulations and our comments on them. So turn it over to you.
Good afternoon. Can folks hear me online? Yes? Wonderful. So I just want to start off by saying it's absolutely fantastic to be here in Visalia with everyone and joining and sharing space. I will be giving a brief overview of the timeline of when the Department of Labor announced the issuance of the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, the window of time for the comment period, when comment was submitted, and in particular discuss where the ALRB provided comment. So on September 12th, 2023, the U.S. Department of Labor announced issuance of a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking entitled Improving Protections for Workers in Temporary Agricultural Employment in the United States. The proposed amendments focused on strengthening protections for temporary agricultural workers and enhancing the Department of Labor's capabilities to monitor program compliance and take necessary enforcement actions against program violators. The notice of proposed rulemaking was published on September 15th, 2023, and the Department of Labor invited public comment on their proposed amendments to the federal regulations governing H-2A workers. The California Labor and Workforce Development Agency, after consulting with the 7 departments, boards, and panels it oversees, including the ALRB, submitted public comment yesterday. It will take several days, as the chairperson noted, for the DLL to review the comment and before it becomes publicly available. Once it is processed, the comment will be available on the rulemaking docket at regulations.gov. Given the ALRB's expertise in the matter and recent handling of cases involving H-2A workers, we offered insight on a number of the proposed amendments. Specifically, we provided case examples to illustrate the need for a number of these revisions. We want to highlight those proposed amendments where we offered our expertise, including our support for proposed amendments to section 655.122L, requiring disclosure of minimum productivity standards as a condition of job retention, regardless of whether the employer pays a piece rate or hourly wage. Our support for proposed amendments to section 655.22N, adding a definition of termination for cause for H-2A workers. Support for proposed amendments to section 655.135H, broadening protected activity to include collective action. Support for proposed amendments to section 655.135M, subsection 1, requiring employers to provide a worker's contact information to a requesting labor organization. Support for proposed amendments to section 655.135M, subsection 2, requiring employers to permit workers to designate a representative of their choosing to attend any meeting between the employer and a worker where the worker reasonably believes that the meeting may lead to discipline. Support for proposed amendments to section 655.135M, subsection 3, prohibiting employers from engaging in coercive speech to try to prevent workers from advocating for better working conditions on behalf of themselves and their coworkers. Support for proposed amendments to section 655.103, adding the definition for key service provider, consisting of a non-exhaustive list of examples of the types of service providers that farm workers should have access to. And here we specifically noted the importance of including community-based organizations as well as translators or interpreter within that scope as defined as a key service provider. And our support for proposed amendments to section 655.135 and subsection 1 and 2, recognizing the right of workers residing in employer-provided housing to invite guests to their living quarters and or common areas near such housing, subject only to reasonable restrictions designated to protect worker safety or prevent interference with other workers' enjoyment of those areas. And so as you can see, these were the proposed amendments where the ALRB lended its expertise and provided comment. We did derive our comments based on case examples and or just general application of ALRB precedent. There are a number of other proposed amendments that the ALRB did not provide specific comment. These were just the areas in which we felt that we could lend our expertise and provide some guidance or to illustrate the need for such revisions. We're grateful to have worked with the labor agency on this important matter. Additionally, I'd like to note this was a fantastic team effort, collaborative effort between the board and the general counsel. It was truly a opportunity of great importance to me. And I think, we will be able to more clearly appreciate the impact and breadth of our comments once they're made publicly available, again, at regulations.gov. At this moment, I'm going to turn it over to our general counsel, Julie Montgomery, who's going to be providing a little bit more insight as to the collaborative process and how we arrived to providing such comment.
Thank you, Member Flores. Yeah, I just want
Oh, thank you. So yeah, I think these are really important protections, as many may know, some may not. Most other states in the US don't have an ALRB or its equivalent. And so farm workers, because they're excluded from the National Labor Relations Act, they don't have the same protections that farm workers in California have. So these regulations do help fill some of that gap up and give workers more protections. And so I think we at the ALRB are uniquely positioned to provide our expertise and insight and support for a lot of these proposed regulations, because we've been doing it for more than 45 years. And we have the track record and the knowledge and the case examples to show what an impact this work can and does have for farm workers. And so I'll just briefly mention that we did cite a number of our case examples and cases that we have successfully brought to illustrate why these regulations are important, and really urging that these regulations be adopted. So we cited a couple of recent cases for H-2A workers, Moritz and Farms, where workers complained and weren't called back to work the next season. We got $328,000 settlement for them in that case. And then there was another case involving an employer called Dutton Ranch, where we made a finding that there were unlawful threats to workers H-2A workers who had been complaining about conditions. And we got a good settlement out of that case. And in addition, a nonprofit organization, California Rural Legal Assistance, came in and got several $100,000 for those workers as well. So we actually have the cases to show that these are needs. And of course, H-2A workers are among the most vulnerable of farm workers, given that they're tied to one employer. They don't have the ability to quit and go somewhere else if their conditions are substandard. So anyway, with that, I'll just say that it was a wonderful collaborative process. And I want to give a shout out to Member Flores, to our Labor Workforce Development Agency, and Cal OSHA and Labor Commissioner and the Employment Development Department also collaborated in these comments. And then our attorney in Salinas, Michael Marsh, also helped draft the comments. So thanks to all, and appreciate the effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. And thank you, Cynthia, and the rest of the team that assisted with putting those together. It was a very comprehensive document with a lot of detailed feedback that I hope and think the Department of Labor will find helpful to help support a lot of their proposals and share our experience here with ensuring workers have access to these protections and these rights. Do any of my colleagues have any questions for Cynthia? Okay, all right. I don't think so. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the administrative services report. We do not have an administrative services report today, or a litigation, or excuse me, or a legislation or regulatory update. So we'll be going into our informational panel, and I'll give a few moments if our panelists want to come and sit up here on my left. Our informational panel is discussing pesticides in agriculture with an overview of the regulatory framework and a discussion of its impact on farm workers. This is a panel that I think several of us have been wanting to do for a long time. I know, speaking at least for myself, we do have my colleague, board member Lightstone, I know throughout his career has had a lot of experience analyzing these issues and studying these issues. I, for one, have not had as much. And given my previous role at DIR, which oversaw Cal OSHA, all I knew was that Cal OSHA didn't have jurisdiction. So I'm excited to learn more about the regulatory framework, and I'm really grateful to the Department of Pesticide Regulation for joining us today. And we'll pause for just a moment and get situated, and then we'll get started. In one moment, we're just getting some technical stuff together, and we'll start our panel shortly. Almost there. I don't know about this view for the map. I'll be able to hear you.
I can see them. Looks good.
Might let you rotate out.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Am I advancing my own slides?
I'll advance, just
Okay.
give me like a knock or a,
Oh, next slide.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Santiago,
And
just
we
let
can
me know
see
when
you,
we're,
so it's good.
let me know when you're ready and then I'll.
Go.
Okay, thank you so much, Santiago. Always kind of learning new systems on the fly, so appreciate it. I'm so pleased to welcome our first panelist, Celia Pazos from the California Department of Pesticide Regulation. Ms. Pazos currently serves as the Assistant Director for Environmental Justice and Equity and will be giving us an overview of DPR. Thank you. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'll try and speak loudly for those in the room and bear with me folks on Zoom. So thank you to members of the board. Thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to be here with you and share a little bit about our department, the California Department of Pesticide Regulation. As mentioned, my name is Celia Pazos. I'm the new Assistant Director. We're good? Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so I was just saying, the presentation is going to cover a lot, but it's short, so yeah, not yet. So since I lead the department's environmental justice and equity programs, we're going to shift gears and talk about environmental justice and what that means for our work at the department. We'll look at a little bit of data and discuss how this impacts lived experiences of folks that work and live in California agricultural communities, particularly farm workers. And then we'll discuss our worker health and safety programs and how environmental justice ties into that work and some of the steps we're taking to improve farm worker health and safety. Likely a primary focus for folks in the room and for those on the board. Lastly, we'll talk about sustainable pest management and the department's goals for eliminating high-risk pesticides by 2050. So this is a slide, so don't show this yet. So the Department of Pesticide Regulation is part of the California Environmental Protection Agency, or Cal EPA. Our other sister agencies are shown on the screen. They're the Air Resources Board, Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, Department of Toxics, Cal Recycle, and the Water Boards. DPR partners and coordinates with these sister agencies and others, including the California Department of Food and Ag and the Ag Commissioner's Office to fulfill our mission. Next slide. The DPR's mission is to protect people and the environment by regulating pesticides and fostering sustainable pest management. We achieve this vision through our various programs. Next slide. DPR has about 400 staff, mainly scientists who evaluate pesticides for human and health environmental impacts. We also have teams that monitor air and water. We have programs dedicated to fostering safer approaches to pest management and programs focused on worker health and safety that include both regulatory work and outreach to farm workers and pesticide handlers. Okay. So there are several entities that are responsible for carrying out pesticide use regulations. So first at the federal level, pesticides must be registered by the US EPA before they're used in the country. Each state has an agency that works with EPA to enforce pesticide regulations. In California, that agency is us, the Department of Pesticide Regulation. And then the Agricultural Commissioner enforces pesticide laws and regulations locally. And we'll get into that in a couple of the next slides. So our role is to evaluate pesticide products before they can be used or sold in California through a process we call registration. DPR evaluates pesticide products for human health and environmental impacts to inform registration decisions. This includes review of extensive scientific studies on human health and worker safety. Through this process, we look at all these human health and environmental impacts and consider and either refuse registration or register with conditions on use, including what types of personal protective equipment must be worn. These conditions are on the label of the product, and they are part of the many pesticide use laws and regulations that must be followed to legally apply them in California. Next slide. We also conduct a process called continuous evaluation to review pesticide impacts once the pesticide is approved for use. We monitor pesticides in the air, ground, and surface water, and we also collect pesticide use reports throughout the state, which tells us what quantity and types of pesticides are used. And then we track human health incidents related to pesticide use. We develop mitigation measures based on these assessments. Mitigation can include the requiring the use of tarps for certain pesticides or setback distances before the pesticide can be applied. Using data that we collect, we also develop workplace safety regulations to protect farm workers and those who work near or with pesticides. Next slide. So as I've mentioned, DPR and the County Agricultural Commissioner both play a role in enforcing pesticide use. DPR evaluates all the pesticide products before registration and sale and creates regulations to mitigate potential risks. DPR also provides oversight and guidance to the County Agricultural Commissioners on the enforcement of pesticide laws and regulations. The County Agricultural Commissioner and their inspectors, they inspect pesticide application sites across the state, enforce laws and regulations as guided by DPR, and take actions against violators. They are the local on-the-ground enforcers of pesticide use regulations. Next slide. So there are 55 ag commissioners for California's 58 counties. They are appointed by their county board of supervisors and work with DPR to enforce pesticide use laws. Ag commissioners and their staff conduct inspections, review local permits for pesticide applications, and investigate exposure incidents. So if someone is exposed, the agriculture commissioner is involved. The county agricultural commissioners conduct both planned and surprise inspections. They investigate all reported incidents, and they also issue notices of violation when laws and regulations are broken. They can also issue some fines. DPR has authority to take additional enforcement actions when those pesticide use laws are broken. Next slide. So as promised, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about environmental justice and how it relates to the work of DPR and the Ag Commissioner. Environmental justice is a priority for the department, and we're taking steps to mitigate pesticide impacts on overburdened communities. So the underlying principle of environmental justice is that people should not be exposed to higher pollution, including pesticides, because of their race, immigration status, or income. Meaningful involvement means that people have an opportunity to participate in the decisions that affect their lives. It means the public can actually influence our regulatory decisions, that community concerns will be considered in our decision-making, and that we will seek out and facilitate involvement of those affected, but who may face barriers to access. Next slide. So focusing in on the connection to pesticides and environmental justice, the map on the screen It's showing up a little blurry, but the map on the screen shows the combined pesticide use score in Cal EnviroScreen. Cal EnviroScreen is a tool developed by our sister agency, OEHA. The map shows pesticide use in pounds per square mile of select high hazard, high volatility pesticides. The darker blue shows the areas of the highest use of these pesticides, and the white and gray shows the lowest use. So it's no surprise that we see the darker blue colors in the agricultural areas of California. That's where the most of these pesticides are used. But we also have data that show farm workers and communities near agriculture are at greater risk of pesticide exposure. We have studies that show exposure to some pesticides have links to cancer, birth defects, and respiratory issues. We also have studies that show pregnant low-income Latina women living in agricultural communities had pesticide metabolites in their urine up to 2.5 times higher than representative sample of women. And the study also found that farm worker homes had pesticide residues not found in low-income urban housing. Next slide. So we can compare this pesticide use data with other demographic data. According to the US Census Bureau's American Community Survey, nearly 44% of Californians speak a language other than English at home, and 9% of households are linguistically isolated. Linguistic isolation are households where all members 14 years of age or older have at least some difficulty speaking English. The figure on the right, it shows the darker blue colors with the highest percentage of limited English-speaking households. And on the left, we have the same pesticide use graphic from the previous slide. Comparing the two, we see some areas of high pesticide use also have high linguistic isolation, again, in the agricultural areas of the state. A high degree of linguistic isolation among members of a community creates a barrier to accessing health information and public services. It's a barrier to effective engagement to the regulatory process that impacts them. People with limited English proficiency are less likely to have health insurance or regular medical care and are less likely to receive medical information or advice. Next slide.
Celia, can I ask, does that linguistic isolation factor in literacy rate as well? So if there's a low literacy rate, do you know?
I don't know. The definition I have is where all members 14 years of age or older have some difficulty speaking English.
Okay.
So I imagine the literacy rate is factored into other.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
I don't know.
Just curious.
Thank you.
For the question. So on the slide now, we're comparing pesticide use rates with poverty data. So on the right is a map of California showing percent of population living below the federal poverty level, again with blue representing the highest rates. And on the left is the same pesticide use map. Again, we see some areas with high pesticide use are also communities with high poverty rates. Poverty is an important social determinant of health. Numerous studies show that impoverished populations are more likely to experience adverse health outcomes when exposed to environmental pollution compared to wealthier populations. This is because wealth influences one's living conditions, nutrition, occupation, and access to healthcare. These factors combine to create health disparities in low-income communities. Next slide. So farm workers and low-income agricultural communities face multi-layered and complex issues that contribute to environmental and health disparities. These include housing insecurity, pesticide exposure, as we've discussed in the last couple of slides, workplace mistreatment, and access to healthcare. And some of the barriers include language barriers, cultural barriers, social isolation, and immigration status. Some of the issues identified by farm workers are pesticide drift, lack of field worker training, pesticide notification, language access, and fear of retaliation when reporting an incident. But DPR is seeking solutions. In the next few slides, I'll describe the work DPR does to protect farm workers and discuss the steps we're taking to mitigate these health outcomes. Slide. So how does DPR ensure that workers are safe? We have a worker health and safety program That program develops mitigation measures such as label changes and permit conditions before a pesticide can be applied. We provide outreach and education to farm workers and their families. We attend numerous health fairs and community events. We'll be here at the Farm Worker Women's Conference tomorrow as well. And we provide resources for training pesticide handlers and field workers. Next slide. DPR conducts pesticide safety training for farm workers, including training conducted by growers and farm labor contractors. DPR is looking to engage farm workers to better understand how current safety training could be more effective, making the training more accessible, culturally relevant, and understandable. Next slide. DPR maintains a statewide pesticide illness surveillance program to collect data on reported pesticide illnesses and injuries. As I mentioned, for many reasons, farm workers don't always report these incidents. This is something the department is working to better understand and improve. Next slide. So based on the data that we do collect, our actions can include developing additional regulations, amending product labels, and working with county ag commissioners to develop and implement permit conditions that add more restrictions or oversight on the pesticide use. Next slide. We also recognize that despite these programs, there are still barriers to access and that farm workers are still facing disparate health outcomes and face barriers to reporting incidents. To address this, in DPR's strategic plan, we have included several goals to improve language access, engagement, and collaboration with our partners to improve worker health and safety. We have also included goals to increase monitoring to inform mitigation measures. We're also working towards implementing sustainable pest management. That's a whole system approach to reduce the use of high-risk pesticides overall. DPR recently released a roadmap developed by a cross-sector work group to recommend actions to accelerate the transition to sustainable pest management. Next slide. The North Star, or guiding principle, is that pest management in California will promote human health and safety, ecosystem resilience, agricultural sustainability, community well-being, and economic vitality. Next slide. So following this North Star, we aim to achieve our 2050 goals of eliminating the use of highest risk pesticides and adopting sustainable pest management across California. Next slide. So I covered a lot of different aspects of our work. We have a lot going on at the department. So to tie it all together, what's next? How are we moving towards tying all these pieces together? Safer pest management, increasing environmental justice. So we're working to implement the roadmap, which includes recommendations to eliminate high-risk pesticides by 2050. The roadmap includes health and equity as some of the main pillars. We're working to increase staff capacity to meaningfully engage with impacted communities and farm workers so that they can have a role in shaping programs and policies that impact them. We're expanding language access to ensure communities are informed and can participate in the decision-making processes. And we're incorporating equity into our long-term goals through our strategic plan, so communities have a seat at the table and so that we find solutions to eliminate health disparities to protect workers. Next slide. So this slide's just my contact information. Please reach out at any time to me or the department. And that's it. Thank you. I don't know if we do questions now, if you want to do questions later, but
thank you for your time. And that's it on my
Thank you so much. I do have, if you're able to stick around for questions at the end, that would be great. I do have a couple related questions in terms of how the department learns of pesticide exposure incidents. So do licensees or employers, and this is I'm kind of thinking in a Cal OSHA context, do they have a duty to report for an exposure, or how do you learn about those incidents?
I have
Feel
Support
free to
staff here,
phone a
sorry.
friend.
Jack Sahota is here.
my understanding that we
We're part of them through the pesticide illness surveillance program, but I'll let Jack add detail.
Typically, it is, we have a number of channels that we get those reports from. Either a farm worker himself, they can call the local county ag commissioner and then we get the report. Or if they go see a doctor, then the doctor is required to report that illness to us. So
Okay.
that's another way of us knowing that. And then we get a lot of other reporting through poison control system. We have a contract with them and they deliver some of those reports to us.
Okay.
Because like Celia said, we're trying to get this the illness reporting to us. It's not. We want an increase in that. So we're seeking various other channels where we can get that information from. We're trying to get in a contract with the Promotoras organization, where Promotoras are the community health workers that the farm worker community typically relies on. So we're in the process of establishing a contract, so they would interact with the community and they would educate them to basically report those illnesses to us.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Jack.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions? Yes.
I could ask one, just, you talked about there's a plan to phase out some priority pesticides by 2050. Is there a list of the priority pesticides or can you describe what they are?
I can't. We're still working on implementing the roadmap,
Ah.
and that's one of the actions is to bring together a committee of folks to identify these pesticides, and then we'll work to eliminate them, but it doesn't exist yet.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Cynthia.
I noted that in the presentation, language access is a big priority. That's been a topic of discussion at the ALRB as well. What kind of practices can you share that you might be implementing or seeking to implement to enhance language access to information and to create that kind of connection with folks?
Totally. I think
at a very basic level, we're working to expand translation and interpretation services. So it may seem obvious, but we are working to improve that. I think there's space to continue translating all of our documents, all of our meetings, offering interpretation services where needed. We also have PSAs, public service announcements in various languages. But I think what I will note is one of the focuses that I've identified or that we realize we need to work on is making our information, our fact sheets, our website, different materials just easier to understand and read. We get very caught up in our pesticide jargon, and my presentation was probably full of it too. I'm guilty of it as well, but I think that's another place that we're looking to simplify and make the information accessible in addition to just, you know, straightforward language translation. So those are some of the areas that we're working to improve.
Okay, thank you so much. And I can appreciate that. I think all of our communications professionals are begging us to not let the lawyers write anything because we need more plain language education.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And please stick around if you're able. Our next presenter is a researcher from the UC Merced Community Labor Center, Rodrigo Alatriste Diaz. He will be discussing his research on impact of pesticides on farm worker health. And then, Celia, I don't know if you and Rodrigo, if you're able to switch seats, that might work better for our audio quality.
Right. Yeah.
I have a PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, 1 second. Let me.
I have a copy of it on a flash drive. Yeah. Thank you. I could get started though. Hi everyone, my name is Rodrigo Alatriste Diaz. I'm a researcher with the UC Merced Community and Labor Center. I want to thank Chairperson Victoria Hasid for the invitation to share our findings with you, the ALRB, and the public today. I'm super excited to share findings of a 2-year study on the health and well-being of California farm workers. I had the privilege of working as a researcher on this project, along with Ed Flores, Faculty Director of the UC Merced Community and Labor Center, Paul Brown, UC Merced Professor of Health Economics, and Ana Padilla, Executive Director of the UC Merced Community and Labor Center. Before we share survey results, I'd like to share a couple of acknowledgements. Next slide, please. Foremost, to thank the California Department of Public Health for sponsoring this study. We would also like to acknowledge several other groups and researchers without whom this study would not have been possible. The Farm Worker Community Advisory Board, Kauai Delta, Bow Clinic, researchers from several institutions, and an advisory committee that provided oversight of the study. So the purpose of this presentation today is to share findings from our report, specifically about workplace compliance, training among farm worker pesticide applicators. Today, I will first share a little about the context of agricultural work in California, the purpose of the farm worker health study, relevant conceptual framing in the field of public health, our study's research methodology, demographics, findings, and recommendations from the report. Next slide. Some important context for this study is that agricultural workers have historically experienced among the least work protections in the nation. Early California industrial agriculture was modeled upon the Southern plantation model, and when modern-day worker protections were established, such as the National Labor Relations Act or the Fair Labor Standards Act, the only two worker groups excluded from those protections were agricultural workers and domestic workers, jobs primarily held by Southern Black workers. To this day, these groups don't have the same unionization, collective bargaining, or wage and hour federal protections. These exclusions were created to preserve a caste system that now affects largely a Latino immigrant population that also lacks formal rights as citizens. And we should have a footnote on our presentation that the ALRB does uphold some of these rights. Next slide, please. The primary purpose of our study was to determine the health of farm workers in California. Secondary aims included determining some of the social determinants of health, such as healthcare access, healthcare coverage, and workforce health and training needs. In this presentation, I'll share data from our report focusing on training needs and workers' willingness to report employer noncompliance. Next slide, please. The concept of social and economic organization serves as our report's key conceptual framework. The earliest social science studies showed a relationship between social position, like race and gender, economic position, like education and income, and health. W. Du Bois, who pioneered the first social science study in the US, argued that poor health outcomes were a result of social factors. For example, high mortality rates among communities of color, like the Black community he studied in Philadelphia, but that economic position played a significant role in such racial disparity. Du Bois noted that Chicago's back of the yard neighborhood comprised mostly of white meatpacking workers, who were also farm workers, had higher mortality rates than Black people in Chicago. In short, his study concluded that race matters to your health, but so does the quality of your work. Several decades later, literature in the field of public health coined the term social determinants of health while making very similar arguments about race, income, and mortality. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we have representation of the social determinants of health. Today, the term social determinants of health is foundational in the field of public health, human services. A couple of examples include the World Health Organization, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Next slide, please. So our report is an intervention in the field of public health because the term social determinants of health often refers to factors such as housing and the built environment, or water and soil. To the extent that employment is mentioned, it is usually in the context of income. For example, increasing employment rates, reducing workdays missed due to workplace injuries, rather than the quality of work. The Farm Worker Health Study is the largest academic survey on the health and well-being of agricultural workers, and we supplement the study of health by asking many key questions on workplace dynamics that have rarely or never been asked in previous major studies of farm worker health. Our survey asks questions about farm worker health, health access, but also about experiences with farm work and the quality of such work, such as employer compliance with wage and hour provisions, workplace health and safety standards, and fear of retaliation. Next slide, please. We designed our study as a community engaged research project. Our center held its first meeting with a farm worker community advisory board comprised of directors of the state's leading farm worker service organizations. 26 organizations consisting of community, worker, and labor organizations were engaged with the research study for over 2 years. The Farm Worker CAB provided strategic input during every step of the study. It is because of our CAB that we had questions related to research survey items such as wage theft, the California heat standard, women's reproductive health, that are rarely or never asked in public health research on farm workers. We would like to thank the following with whom the study would not have been possible. Next slide, please. This is the Farm Worker CAB. Some of the participants to my left are on that list. Next slide, please. That one's good. These are some of the researchers that contributed to the study. Next slide, please. The data collection team. Next slide, please. Research staff. Next slide. And additional report writing. Next slide. So getting into the research methodology, the size of agricultural worker study and its level of community engagement is unique in the academic literature. The CAB helped to recruit 1,200 or to conduct 1,242 in-person interviews with farm workers between August of 2021 and January of 2022. Interviews were 2 hours in length in 6 languages in 6 of the state's major farm working regions. Our study was carried out in Spanish, English, Mixteco, Zapotec, Iliqui, and Ilocano. In addition, 205 out of the 1,000 and so surveys also completed a medical survey and provided non-fasting blood draw. Next slide, please. I'll share some findings now, starting with the demographics of our sample and how it compares with representative data on farm workers. Next slide, please. The Farm Worker Health Study is based on a convenient sample of California agricultural workers. While not a random sample, the study sample shares many of the characteristics of the California farm workers in other representative studies. The demographics of respondents are very similar to the characteristics of agricultural workers in the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey. So the column on the left is the Farm Worker Health study results, and the column to the right is the American Community Survey. You'll notice that our survey had a larger amount of female farm workers, indigenous farm workers, and foreign-born. And in terms of the greater participation of women farm workers and indigenous farm workers, that's due to oversampling. We wanted to ensure that we were able to capture those distinct groups. Next slide, please. Similarly, for the geographic distribution, you'll notice that some of the smaller agricultural communities like Sonoma were oversampled, as well as Imperial and Coachella Valley and the lower Central Coast. The sample size for these communities was larger in case we later wanted to run statistical tests that require a larger sample size for higher level of confidence. Next slide, please. This next section is on employer compliance with pesticide-related workplace health and safety standards and the willingness to report non-compliance among all farm workers. Next slide, please. The state of California is responsible for examining, certifying, and licensing workers who apply pesticides. Farm workers who work as pesticide applicators are routinely exposed to toxic chemicals such as pesticides, fumigants, as part of their occupation. Data from our study indicates workers experience substantial non-compliance with pesticide-related workplace health and safety standards. In the farm worker health study, nearly 1 in 10 workers reported applying pesticides in the past 12 months. 25% of those who worked applying pesticides reported they did not receive any training on the use of pesticides. Among those who did receive training, 21 reported not understanding the training. That is to say, as a whole, only 57% of the workers who applied pesticides in the past 12 months had received training on safe use of pesticides in a way they felt they understood. Next slide, please. When we asked if farm workers would report employer noncompliance that they witnessed, only 1 in 3 farm workers said they would be willing to report noncompliance. Nearly 2 in 3 of those persons said they would be unwilling to file a report due to fear or retaliation, such as job loss or deportation. Next slide, please. Our report ends with several policy recommendations, but most recommendations are aligned with shifts in statewide policy and emerging initiatives that are already underway. 2 recommendations to highlight today are: we recommend continuing to invest public resources in protecting workers' rights. The California Worker Outreach Project and its 2-year extension are an example of such an investment in worker rights education, and so is enhancing the state's ability to enforce existing standards. We recommend investing public resources in agricultural development that raises industry work standards. For example, the High Road Framework that has been a blueprint for the state's efforts at economic and climate resilience is one prominent example of this. The question is how we incentivize the development of the high road in an industry with so many workers who already lack many worker protections, and one increasingly affected by rapid demographic change, climate, and technological change. Thank you for your time and your attention. Please visit our website for a complete copy of our report. Next slide, please. We have a link there, and I'm happy to take any questions now or later.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. Really appreciate that overview, and just thankful to your work, the work of the team and the Community Advisory Board for the study, because I think it's provided a lot of valuable data for a variety of organizations, including government entities. I'm just wondering, given your research in this area, if there were any findings with respect to the pesticide issues that you found surprising or that you weren't anticipating?
Well, I mean,
one of the data, one of the findings is that, and maybe it's more of a limitation, was that of workers who received training, the portion that did not felt that they didn't understand the training, because it was such a small number of workers, of something like 18 workers, it was hard to be able to derive additional information in terms of whether that was due to language access, or I think language access, was something that we anticipated would be part of the level of comprehension amongst workers. And so because we didn't have enough data, we weren't able to analyze that further.
I'll look to see, do any of my colleagues have any questions for Rodrigo? And then we may have received an indication that one of our Zoom participants had a question.
Yeah, sorry, I'm pulling up the Zoom window. Mr. Garcia, would you question? If so, unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hold on, we got an audio issue. Would you mind turning up, Victoria, can you turn up the volume on your laptop? Maybe we can pick up. Okay, let's try that one more time, Mr. Garcia.
Hello, can you hear me now? Fabulous. All righty. Yeah, so I just want to definitely give kudos to UC Merced for addressing pesticides in the San Joaquin Valley. I think that it's long overdue, and this type of research really helps to reveal some of the or contributes to the conversation on the health disparities of farm workers overall. And I think that it's also important to recognize and acknowledge that a lot of the pesticide use is heavily concentrated, disproportionately concentrated in regions where there are a lot of farm worker families, and also bring attention to the fact that it's imperative that the Department of Pesticide Regulation addresses head-on real substantive change. And one thing that can be done on the sooner side of things is to altogether create a robust health protective measure on a pesticide called 1,3-dichloropropene, or 1,3-D, and highly encourage them to work in concert with the Office of Environmental Health Hazard to really align themselves with the cancer experts at the state and put forth a adoption or a draft regulation that is more along the lines of 0.04 parts per billion, as opposed to the one that they have already announced previously, which is 0.56 parts per billion. And so there's a 14 times difference there, disparity. And so we definitely want to just echo that when we're talking about farm workers, we gotta trailblaze as well when it comes to adopting or putting forth any sort of health protection. So kudos to everyone, but just definitely want to acknowledge UC Merced for their leadership in environmental justice and addressing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel.
Thank you. And do we have anyone else on the Zoom wishing to make a comment or question? Yeah, oh, Julie, do you mind actually coming up here, or even right here? There, it'll just get the audio better.
Yes, thank you.
Wondering if outreach or in impacting
From a lot of different places, and some of it might be conflicting with what Seamer said would provide, right? Because, and they're working in an industry where they don't have a choice but to go to work, and they're going to be around pesticides. So it's hard to hear folks being exposed to. So just wondering if you encountered some challenges in that regard, and how you to address those to, I guess, do like, and what advice you'd have for us in doing outreaches to how to address some of those challenges when we're talking to communities.
Yeah, I think so in terms of like public education workshop model, the majority of public education that does it, California immigrant worker out, and the
It looks like we lost sound. Apologies. Not sure if the phone is muted over here or not. The problem. Okay.
Okay. Should I respond again? Okay, yeah. So again, that the UC Merced Community and Labor Center doesn't yet have a workshop public outreach model, but that the California Immigrant Worker Outreach Project, which is facilitated by UC Merced, relies on community-based organizations to connect with workers as well as community health outreach workers, and that I believe CPR mentioned earlier that there's interest in establishing an outreach component that also relies on community health outreach workers. So I think there's overlap and congruence in terms of best practices. And I think some of my colleagues will, from CBOs, will also have ideas about how best to engage with farm workers. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Okay, we are now going to take a 10-minute break before we get on to the rest of our presenters. So we will be back at 3:35, give people a chance to stretch their legs and get a bite to eat or something.
That on? Keep us.
All right. Who's speaking next? Over here. Okay, good. Excellent. So that's for the in-room mic, and this is for the Zoom mic.
Okay, thank you. We are back to continue with the rest of the panel. Our next presenter, next we're going to get into a series of panelists to give farm worker perspectives. Our next presenter is Rocio Madrigal, who is a community outreach worker with Central California Environmental Justice Network, CCEJN. Rocio, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is and neighbors. You heard that California has stringent rules. You could imagine these rules are enough to protect farm workers, but the reality is that they are not always protected for a variety of reasons. It's not easy to. Farm workers do not know even the name or where the ag commissioner is. They don't know where to submit reports. They don't have and sometimes don't know how to use technology. It is true that there is a Casper app where they can submit reports, but the problem is that while they're working in the fields, they are sometimes not allowed, forbidden to use those cell phones and retaliated. We had worker A that saw some violations, made a petition, got signatures, left those papers and her cell phone at work, and her car was, the windshield was broken, and the only things taken was the phone and the signatures of the people who she had asked to support her in a report she was going to do. People responding to the reports sometimes do not follow through or respond in a timely manner or with the right attitude. If it's not timely, the workers feel that what they are reporting is not of any importance to the person receiving the report. Worker number 2, she submitted a report that there was something had been sprayed in the location where she was working. The inspector that responded said to me personally, "We cannot find the location." And that is after I had called the ag commissioner, DPR, Cal OSHA, and some office I found online in Sacramento. I know the exact date, July 7th, because I have some messages that I keep to remind me that it is not important to them. His biggest obstacle that he said was, well, this owner has a 1 square mile of property. Can you pinpoint the location? The worker could not pinpoint the location. I could not pinpoint the location. And I said, well, you have a vehicle. I assume you have gas. I assume you have air conditioning. And it's 1 mile. It broke my heart that that is the reason that he was not responding or trying harder to find it. Worker number 3, another worker called CCJN to report that pesticides were being applied in a field next to the field where she was working. Video was taken for over an hour and 20 minutes. I made a report. CCJN sent the report to the inspector at the Fresno Ag Commissioner, but they did not visit the farm where the incident had happened. They argued that, again, they could not find the location. When Naimine Martinez insisted in a public meeting for follow-up and called an inspector and said that the farm worker needed help and they needed to respond, she was called out as making something up in a public meeting. The worker that reported this finally did get to speak from someone in the Ag Commissioner's office. The worker called her, harassed her, and was demanding that she make the report and give her name and give her cell phone information. And the worker simply said, "You did not respond in a timely manner. I don't think me making a report is going to help anybody at this point." And she was scolded by the worker. There is more than lack of customer service in some of our state offices. Lastly, worker number 4 reported a spray in the Madera County. CCJN once again submitted a report. And I don't know that you know, but the investigation sometimes takes 6 to 18 months. So we report a possible drift or a possible spray, and the report can take 6 to 18 months. Finally, we received it last week, the answer from Madera, and it was a short 3-page answer. Really, the only investigation was asking the lead contractor, was anybody sick? The workers were not asked. But if I'm a contractor, I'm probably going to protect my contracting agency, and I'm not going to report the incident. We mentioned that our doctors are going to help the DPR with reports. I beg to differ. I have 3 farm workers in Madera that went into a field that had been sprayed with something. A few days later, 3 out of that 1 crew got sick. One of them was diagnosed with pneumonia acquired in the community. 3 people out of the same crew got sick and went to the ER. Again, because of retaliation, they do not want to make a report. These are small communities where they will not have work. They will be known as, you know, the snitch, the tattletale. And this is very real for them. Retaliation and deportation is extreme fear that prohibits them. And even more so when they call and they're not answered in a timely manner, or they talk to rudely. I have another example, but it is for a different state agency, so I won't mention that one today. But we have had several since we have been reporting 2 different state agencies for about 2 years now, those that we can report anonymously, and we hope to have more. Overall, we believe that to fully protect farm workers from pesticides, we need to ensure that proper enforcement of the regulations that DPR creates, more outreach, and appropriate responses from the Ag Commissioners that are entrusted to do the local enforcement. We have tried as a CBO to have someone from the Department of Ag Commissioner to speak to a group of about 30 farm workers on Zoom, making it very convenient for them. You know, they can do it from the comfort of their home. We have been denied that request. Before, she did one presentation once, and because farm workers had comments and questions, a lot of them, she said she felt like they were aggressive. And that is the excuse that we're given of why she cannot. Recently, we had Lourdes Cruz present to our Zoom group. She did a wonderful job. They had lots of questions, and she got lots of answers from them too. I asked Ms. Bastos if she would share one slide. I don't know if it's possible, with the 6 agencies that they work with. Yes, from DPR. And the establishment of other measures that have proven effective in some counties like in Kern County, where growers notify the farms near their properties when they are doing pesticide applications. That way, there are no crews working in the neighboring field. Overall, we should be following other pest management practices that do not rely on chemicals that are meant to kill. Just because our families are not dying from one day to the next does not mean they're not dying. I asked if they could put this slide up because Californians for Pesticide Reform have had a campaign against T-loan, and it is cancer causing. And OEHA that you see there on the upper right are the scientists that give the results to DPR to tell them what is safe or safest. It's not safe. 0.04 is still parts per million that cause cancer to the workers and to anybody that lives around these places that are sprayed. And still, in Fresno County and Kern County, we have the highest levels in the state. And that is not considered an urgency, and that's the problem. We just heard from UC Merced that it was a small amount of people, but even say if it was 25% of the people handling chemicals or fumigants that do not receive proper training, 25% of hundreds of thousands of workers is a lot of people because they get sick, they don't have insurance, and their years as seniors, if they make it there, are very painful. And I'm sorry, I've taken up too much time. Thank you.
Not at all. First of all, we really appreciate your presentation. Thank you. And I just want to, before seeing if any of my colleagues have questions, just make a note. One, really appreciate CCEJN being here. And Rocio kind of referenced it in her presentation, but CCEGN has been a key member of a community group in the Valley here called Campo that organized about 2 years ago to really try and work with state agencies, ALRB being one of them, to make sure that we are truly serving the entire state and really reaching out to farm workers. And that was their efforts, their advocacy have been one of the reasons why we felt it was really important to bring our board down to Visalia. And so I just want to applaud their work there and highlight for their members that they are advocating strongly and they're being heard. One question I have for you, and it's been a discussion in some of those meetings, but I'd love to think about it as you know, was reflected in the farm worker health study and as some of the other panelists and you mentioned, there's a lot of fear about reporting, but workers thankfully trust your organization to share their stories. And I'm wondering, what are some key activities that maybe you have done or best practices that you've engaged in that have helped build trust? Because I think that's something that we're always trying to improve upon, because we know that farm workers in particular don't always trust government agencies, even those that, like us, our mission is to help farm workers.
I think some of the best practices is going to their meetings. Our outreach workers goes to Head Start meetings,
parent meetings, different meetings where you are alongside them, learning other issues that they're dealing with. And once they see that you care,
they also
listen to what you have to say. And just like other things that we learn, even as academic people, we may not learn something the first time. We may not understand it. We may not believe it. But they need to continue being told.
Like I told Carlota, you want to do PR, Spanish radio. You want to do, cheap billboards, Fresno County, Madera County. We're not LA. They don't cost millions. So repetitive outreach. And although I applaud DPR for being here tomorrow, it looks beautiful, the preparations that have been done for the workers. It's reaching just a few, because when you present in a big room, it does not have the same impact. And we CBOs are ready to do the work. We've been doing the work. I've been with CCJN 4 years. I've handed out hundreds of DPR materials and talk to them about all the time and try to encourage them. But again, their fear is very real. And when they are treated harshly, I have been screamed at. I did 4 heat police reports and violations this summer. I was screamed at by a state employee. You know, what I tell state agencies is please record. Just like other businesses, record your calls. Use your technology, and you will see how people calling in are treated. If you really want to know.
It's valuable feedback. We've been talking about doing more training about how to better engage with the community across agencies. So I think that's something that I'll be taking back to our group. Do any of my colleagues here have any questions? And then do we have any questions on the Zoom? Pause a moment. Okay. All right. Thank you, Rocio. And then I think we'll ask for you to rotate out with our next panelist, which is going to be Edgar Aguilar, the managing director for Promotoras con Alma. And as referenced by one of the panelists earlier, Edgar's with one of the larger statewide promotora organizations, these health workers that assist farm workers, and excited to learn more about your work in this area.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I wanted to thank the board for inviting us to share some of our outreach education efforts surrounding protecting the rights, dignity, and health of farm workers. We partner with several state departments in order to bring information to promotoras across the state. Promotoras is a fairly new organization. We've been around for 4 years. I've been working with promotoras for over 15 years. Our executive director, Chili Romero, has been working with promotoras for over 30 years. So we have a lot of experience of engaging promotoras in order for them to do the work they love doing and are so effective in doing and reaching community. Through our organization, we provide training, we provide support to promotoras. We coordinate a promotora coalition where promotoras can meet each other and support each other. We learn from them. We learn about the needs of the community in order for us to better respond to them. Look for allies that will help us respond to the needs that arise in our communities. Being a promotora, it's not an easy job. Just recently, the state of California released a list of competencies that a promotora must meet in order to be certified as a promotora. So a promotora must have, according to the state, and we've witnessed this, an effective promotora does possess all these qualities and skills. They must have communication skills, interpersonal and relationship building skills, service coordination, capacity building skills, advocacy, education skills, facilitation skills. They must be able to evaluate the community and the individuals they serve. They must have outreach skills. They must have professional skills in conduct and have a knowledge base according to whatever topic they are bringing out to the community. And promotoras must be passionate about the work they do. They serve different roles. One of the main roles that they serve is that they're a bridge between agencies and the community we're trying to serve. But they're a two-way bridge. And I think this is important to highlight that although, yes, promotoras can receive training and they go out and they bring this information out to community, we as agencies or state departments must be able to hear the information they bring back as well. They can inform us very well about what's going on in the community and how better serve the people that we're trying to reach. Promotoras are advocates, they're coaches, they provide social support, they provide many different types of direct services. So as you could probably tell, I love promotoras. Promotoras are amazing people. One of the things that I think distinguish promotoras even more so than other types of workers are not the skills, but the qualities they possess. Promotoras and I've met thousands of them, are compassionate, they have empathy, they have respect, persevere, they're creative, problem solvers, all in order to get the services or the information that the community needs. But one of the most important qualities of a promotora is that they belong to the community we're trying to reach. So we don't have to tell them about the problems or challenges or opportunities that this community is facing. They live them every day. They're part of that community. And And because they are part of the community, they have the respect and trust of the community. So that's why I think is that any type of work that we do, where we try to reach community, we must involve promotoras. We just have to involve them. They're so effective at reaching community, and just they have that trust that takes a lifetime to earn, and they have it already. Promotoras reach the community in many different ways. They use traditional outreach and education strategies. They make presentations. They go to health fairs and do tabling events. But they use all other strategies that are not so easy for just to implement. A lot of the education and outreach they conduct happens informally. It's not uncommon to hear, I was at a quinceañera, and they started talking about this, so I informed them. I gave them the information that I know about this topic. I was at a wedding. I was waiting for my child to be released from school, and I heard some parents talking about this issue, and I intervened and gave them the information that I have. We tell promotoras, you're not nosy, you're a promotora. Eres chismosa, eres promotora, right? Because they want to help. They just can't help it. One of the strategies that we have found very successful are charlas caseras, home meetings, where we train promotoras on a certain topic, and then they go out and they talk to people they know, and they ask one person, would you like to learn more about pesticides, COVID, diabetes, whatever the topic may be? Yes, I do. Gather another 4 or 5 people, and we can go to your house, meet at your garage, meet in the backyard, meet anywhere. So this is a safe environment for them to receive education and training. So charlas caseras, just to give you an example of the success of one project, the charlas caseras. We trained a total of 77 promotoras through 5 workshops. And they went out and they provided charlas caseras 1 hour long to 987 people. And these were in-depth conversations. One of the promotoras, which I really loved, she spoke Mixteco. She translated the information into Mixteco, and she delivered this charla in Mixteco in the family's living room. Another reported they went to Denny's, and that's where she gave a training to about 5-7 people. It's a safe environment. They're able to ask questions because they're talking to friends. They're talking to a promotora who's also, they're from the same neighborhood. So charlas caseras is an amazing strategy that can reach a lot of people. And again, it's not just providing information, but just fostering these relationships. Another project that we worked with OIHA. They asked us if we would help them coordinate 5 workshops, and these were all virtual workshops, engage promotoras that had a relationship or were working with farm workers. So we were able to coordinate 5 workshops. There was a total of 160 promotoras that received the training, and these promotoras went out and they reached 3,200 people just in this project. After that, we couldn't keep track, but they keep on going. They have this in their toolbox, and they're going to use it. They continue using this information. After that workshop, we asked promotoras again, what are some of the needs for education needs, information, resources that are needed for farm workers? We started talking to Lucia about this early on as well, and we thought we were going to continue talking about pesticides, but they identified so many other issues that we ended up developing a series of trainings. The trainings, let me see, I lost my note here. We worked with with EDD, with Kalosha, with OIHA, with the Labor Commissioner's Office, in order to deliver different topics, because now it's okay, we learned about pest, and also we cover pesticides again, but now they also learn how to report, how to make a report. They learned about, they were asking about heat protection, fires, They were asking about what if they don't pay me the hours that I need, or how do I protect myself from retaliation. So through this series of 6 workshops, again, 30 promotoras received training, and we have to do a second series because there was so much interest. So this time there was 27 promotoras that graduated. They participated in all. It was 5 trainings plus a planning session at the end. So it was a total of 6 sessions. So 57 promotoras have gone through all these 6 sessions. They received how many, 12 to 18 hours of training on these different topics. And now we're in the middle of sending them the material they need, and they have committed to reaching a total of 1,200 people with information they learned. One of the main goals of this series, yes, it was to educate promotoras about these different topics, but it was also to connect them to the different departments that are in charge of protecting farm worker rights. So they could know, they could put a face to the name of who's supposed to protect this right, that right, this other right. And also that these different department representatives could hear and learn from promotoras. They can learn the reality they're facing. They can learn about the needs and hopefully implement it into your own process, into your own, into what you serve and what you offer the community. One of the most important things is these relationships. We talked about fear of reporting a violation. That's very true. It's very true to farm workers. But now one of the ways that we can help in overcoming that barrier is I'm no longer calling the state. I'm calling Lucia. You know, I'm calling Lucia to report this violation. I'm calling this promotora who I know, who I trust, and she's helped me in other ways. I'm calling Sandra. I'm sure they call Sandra a lot. So, and not only that, but now when we talk about pesticides, and we tell them, oh, if you see these symptoms, go to the doctor. Well, it's easy to say go to the doctor when you have insurance, you have time off work, but what if they don't? Then again, the promotora can help them, you know, against health insurance, enroll into Medi-Cal if they qualify. They can inform them about the sliding fee scale for the local health clinic so they can get health care. So it's not just giving them information, but it's connecting them to all these other resources that build that trust, that build that relationship between the promotora and, again, the community that we're trying to serve. When we were, as we talked to promotoras and as they talked to people in the community, there were certain things that came up that we thought, we shared this with presenters and they adjusted the way they delivered their education. For example, we saw that a lot of people refer to pesticides as they were applying medicine to the plants. So the presenter then made sure to address that, because that perspective needs to change. You know, this is not medicine. This is harmful to your health. So you need to protect yourself from this. One of the recommendations was when you get home, take off your shoes, leave them outside, don't walk inside with them. This lady said, if I do that, they won't be there in the morning. You know, I live in a rough neighborhood. They're going to steal my shoes if I leave them outside. So now, you know, how do we troubleshoot that? How do we have conversations and come up with solutions that are effective in the community that can be applied to the reality that our people are living day to day? Another reality is there's many families in one household. So it's hard to put in effect some of the recommendations that are given about protecting our families from pesticides. So we need to have conversations, real conversations with community, hear from each other, learn from each other. What's my neighbor doing? What's my comadre doing? And see what's really what can be applied, what's doable to protect our families from pesticides or any of the other issues that arise for farm workers. I would like to encourage the board to continue collaborating with promotora groups. Our promotora group is not the only one in the state. There's many promotora groups, and many of them do amazing work. Continue supporting your staff to work with us, to provide training to our promotoras, to provide that link between promotoras and the staff, to have these more, to foster relationships. Not just this is the 1-800 number that you're going to call, but call Lucia, call Veronica. That makes a world of a difference when you're trying to serve the Latino community. And also listen to what promotoras are bringing back. If they make a recommendation, if they make an observation, value that information that you're hearing from them and try to implement it. I mean, into the procedures that you have in place to serve the community, the promotoras that we are also trying to serve. Funding is always an issue, right? But if there's any funding available for outreach education, consider providing it to promotora groups. They are very effective in reaching community. And I can tell you there's a love for community among promotoras that's I have not seen in other workers or in other job classifications. So again, thank you for giving us the opportunity to share some of these work and just highlight the great work that promotoras do in reaching the Latino community.
Thank you so much. That was so informative. I had a couple of questions. One you touched on, in terms of compensation, when someone has become a certified promotora, is it through like county health organizations or employers, or what are common ways that they can be compensated if they are for this work?
Up to this point, it's only been grant funded. Grant funding is the only way to really support promotora work. Medi-Cal has made some changes through their certification process, but so you can be reimbursed for some of the work that promotoras do as long as it's part of this list of Medi-Cal reimbursable services. So even with the changes that have been made to Medi-Cal, it's very likely that this type of education that we're talking about right now, pesticide, OSHA, reporting, all this stuff, it probably won't be covered. It won't be covered through Medi-Cal reimbursement.
Thank you. Do any of my colleagues have questions? Cynthia?
Thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering for what you might consider the success of the charlas caseras, to what you might attribute that success in terms of reaching folks, or even the informal communications. And I think one of the things that stands out to me is that you're meeting community where they're at, right? Whether it's, in the comfort of their own home or their day-to-day life. And so I just curious to hear your perspective on what makes those outreach or reaching out strategies impactful. Yes. Or what do you think what do you attribute the success of these outreach methodologies to?
The relationships. It's a relationship have with community they're serving. It's not a stranger that you're talking to. It's the lady that you've seen walk her child to school for the past 5 years. So it's not a stranger that's reaching out to you. It's, maybe you haven't engaged in conversation, but now she's part of the neighborhood that you live in. And yes, it is meeting people. It's meeting people where they're at. So it makes it a lot safer. Instead of inviting them, come to a meeting that's going to be held here, we'll come to your home in your living room, and you invite your friends, you invite people that you trust, and we'll give this presentation. So it is those relationships.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on the Zoom?
None in the queue, but
okay.
Come back.
Thank you so much, Edgar.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Irina Baracuya from Líderes Campesinas. Irina, if you can come here.
She said she's like,
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. We have a question from Sandra.
que hagan mambo. Una pregunta que estaban haciendo hace rato, que qué es lo que encontramos en las comunidades, las promotoras o las que hicimos estudio, o también nosotros. Yo soy trabajadora también, entonces un reto de nosotros que tenemos es la tecnología. Muchas de las señoras no tienen un teléfono de estos, o siempre quieren un teléfono de esos que cierra, ¿verdad? Entonces no tenemos, y en el FIS no agarra el internet. Una vez nos obligaron allí en el tractor, hoy estamos como 2 surcos de diferencia. El mayordomo fue y nos trajo, dijo, no se salgan, corren, y se fue corriendo a traernos un galón de leche y un 6 de cerveza. Pero cómo es un reto que tenemos, cómo educan a los mujeres y cómo nos van a proteger también si simplemente el mayordomo, el mujer sabe qué hacer en un caso de expansión. Yo sé que, y tengo que darle reconocimiento al DCR que el año pasado no, y trajimos a 4 mayordomos que sí quisieron venir, porque fueron a los que los trajimos escondidos, porque el ranchero nunca quiere, también tienen miedo. Entonces, es cierto, eran 4 mayordomos, pero cada mayordomo tenía 50 personas a su cargo, otro tenía 38, otro 40 y otro 60. Entonces, para mí fueron muchos trabajadores que aprendieron algo desde que dijeran, pues son 4 mayordomos, ¿qué tanto? Pero el mayordomo ya se fue con esa sabiduría de saber qué hacer en un caso de estación, en un caso de que el avión pase, el helicóptero, lo que sea, trofea de arriba, cae, o el tractor o el vecino. Entonces, no tomamos en cuenta tampoco ni educamos a los doctores. Mi madre murió por los pesticidas y nunca le preguntaron, ¿usted trabajó en el FIL? ¿Usted estuvo expuesta a pesticidas? ¿Usted tomó agua que tenía pesticidas, azufre? Nunca le preguntaron. Todo eso necesitamos, y yo sé que las promotoras no tenemos un sueldo porque yo he sido voluntaria por muchos años y muchos también mis compañeros, mis voluntarios no tenemos. Pero no es porque quieramos un sueldo, pero queremos que nos ayuden, porque por ser trabajadores del FIL yo sé que no tenemos garantías de nada, pero si se puede, ¿por qué no educar a los doctores, a los principales que son nuestros mayordomos? Porque nomás si me dicen a mí, oh, vente, tú te vas a poner de mayordoma y ya, y yo qué sé, yo no sé ni cómo manejar mi plan de pesticidas. Sacan a los trabajadores, vente, y ponen el tanque atrás de la espalda, y ahí anda él rociando con atrás de su espalda. Eso es lo que yo pienso que deberían de poner prioridad también los doctores para que podamos también nosotros nuestra salud, y no nomás la de nosotros, porque también llegamos con nuestra esa es una de las cosas que no nomás porque hayan salido en el estudio, pero también porque lo hemos vivido por años y años. Tengo 40 años y ha sido lo mismo. Ahorita el agua está un poquito más o menos limpia de tanto pelear que hemos hecho, pero no está buena. Ahorita con la inundación se nos salió el drenaje, se contaminó con muchos contaminantes, no sabemos cuántos contaminamos. No nos ha llegado ni una carta que nos han dicho no tomen agua. Entonces, todo eso se necesita. Ese es otro que, pues yo sé que como dice Edgar, a lo mejor le pueden pagar algunas horas, pero no estamos pidiendo sueldo, estamos pidiendo pongan atención, y el día que puso algo de atención, pero también cuando hablamos que está una expansión de pesticidas, siempre el comisionado nunca contesta, siempre nos dice, habla al 211, y el 211, habla que al número 1, que al 2, que al 3, y la gente se aburre. ¿Para qué no nos hacen caso? Entonces, deberíamos de poner atención a todo eso porque nuestras tierras están siendo contaminadas, nuestra agua, nuestro aire, y es para todos, no nomás para un cierto, para los campesinos. Todos vamos a... Tengo mucho que decir, pero... Y la pregunta, pues, es que, ¿qué van a hacer? ¿Qué es lo que piensan que van a poner atención? ¿Van a hablar al... Aquí los tengo, los regaños. Entonces, ¿qué podemos hacer más las promotoras? Porque es un reto la tecnología, el teléfono que nunca contestan. Entonces, Edgar, ¿qué vas a hacer para que conteste el...
Pasamos a la historia, ¿no?
Sería bueno tener que los campesinos tuvieran acceso a algo. Vamos a decir que no nos contesta el teléfono, pero sí tener a alguien directo que podemos ir y él puede ir. Porque ya cuando va el comisionado ya pasa como 3 semanas y ya a lo mejor ya anda el que se enfermó de pesticida ya anda en México, porque luego se van a curar allá.
Una cosa que hemos hecho en cuanto a la tecnología, ¿esto en inglés o en español? Esto es en español. Una cosa que hemos hecho en cuanto a la tecnología para apoyar a promotoras es que se han formado equipos, ¿verdad? Y si una promotora no es tan buena en la tecnología, va con su líder, y la líder es la que somete los reportes o la que entra a internet y llena las cosas que tienen que llenar en línea. Así que es una forma de apoyar, ¿verdad? A las promotoras que no son tan buenas con la tecnología.
Sí, es mucho, por eso es mucho requisito para una queja. Entonces, si nos pasa ahorita, como a nosotros nos pasó, nadie fue, pero nos teníamos que tomar la leche a ver si así se nos quitaban los pesticidas. Entonces, esa es una cosa que deberían de ver todos y poner, yo pienso, van allá con los de arriba, poner en claro qué es lo que los trabajadores hacen, de que saquen aquí al vecino y lo pongan a echar pesquisa, pero también que tienen que enseñarlo, que educarlo, qué es lo que le va a pasar a largo plazo. Nunca sabemos a largo plazo lo que nos va a causar los pesticidas. Tenemos tantas personas enfermas del riñón, por eso que nuestros trabajadores pues ya se están acabando por eso, pero a la que no tengan tanto tecnología, que yo pienso que debería de haber alguien directo que podamos, si yo tengo 20 quejas, llevarlas, y que no, pues es que tienes que ir allá, no, pues que el jefe no está, no, que no existe. Entonces, ¿a dónde vamos?
Me gustaría decir algo acerca de las... Tiene mucha razón, Sandra. Yo sé que pues, las preguntas no son tu punto, eso no me encargo yo, ¿verdad? Pero una cosa que me gustó mucho de la actitud de personas así como Lucía, Verónica y otras que vinieron a los entrenamientos, que decían, pero llámame y yo te dirijo. Aunque no sea conmigo, y yo te conecto con la persona que sí te va a ayudar. Tal vez sea otro departamento, pero te conecto. Así que creo que esa actitud entre los empleados del departamento ayuda mucho, ¿verdad? De que en vez de decir, no es conmigo, esa actitud me encanta, de que realmente así te dirijan.
No, es que no hablan al 211 y ahí te van a conectar. Entonces, a veces ni yo cuando estoy haciendo una llamada se me pasa, tienes que hablar al 1 o al 2. Entonces, menos los trabajadores que ni saben cómo manejar un teléfono de esos,
I really appreciate that feedback because we've talked about the importance of making sure people can come into our offices, as well as making sure we have staff that go into areas where we may not directly have an office. But we need to do more, and also partner with other organizations and have staff available at times when workers can go in the evenings, on the weekend, and in areas where workers are, like Cynthia said, meeting workers where they're at. There's a lot more to do, but trying to help one, educate our staff so that when workers have a question, if it's about pesticides, we know how to help get them to the ag commissioner or to DPR or to a health clinic or a promotora. And then also help guide them there. But there's a lot more work to do. Thank you. All right. Irina, with Líderes Campesinas.
Right. All right. Thank you, Victoria. I don't know if we have the presentation that we could bring up. Oh, okay. So thank you again for the invitation. My name is Irene, or Irene. I'm with Líderes Campesinas. I work as Director of Policy and Communications, and I'm accompanied here with my team. We have Claudia Quesada, our Environmental Justice Coordinator, and Irlanda Ramirez from our Tulare organizer. And so, gracias, compañeras. So I'm going to give a little overview of Líderes Campesinas as a community-based organization. We work statewide, and so a lot of times people don't really know what certain community-based organizations might do, right? A lot of times when I say I'm with Líderes Campesinas, there's a long explanation behind that. And so we're going to just talk a little bit about our work, especially in regards to pesticides and the safety of farm workers. So the mission of Líderes Campesinas is to strengthen the leadership of farm worker women and girls so that they can be agents of economic, social, and political change and ensure their human rights. And we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so like I mentioned, we are statewide. You know, there's a lot of ground that we still need to cover, as you can see on the map there, but we go as far north to Sonoma, Napa, and we're in the Yolo, Colusa, Sacramento region, and then the Central Coast, Monterey, Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, San Luis Obispo areas, as well as Ventura, and then the whole Central Valley, and then Imperial and Coachella. That's as far south as we go. And so we are organized in 17 different regions of the state. And we can move to the next. So the strength of this network of women farm worker leaders has really, you know, shown its strength, its impact throughout the last 30 years of its existence. Over 30 years of you know, advocating for women's rights, and whether it be labor rights, violence against women, health issues, environmental justice, and various other issues, right, related to farm workers, rural communities, and the inequities that exist. And a lot of this also involves technical assistance, so working with different agencies and universities, you know, helping gather surveys for research. It's just another part of what Líderes Campesinas does, is being that bridge in the community. And so we could move to the next slide. This is just a little overview of some of the achievements in relation to pesticides. And I'll talk more about the most recent ones. Our involvement, participation of our executive director in the Sustainable Pest Management Work Group. That was over 3 years of work. And I know Celia mentioned this work of creating a roadmap. And this is because of the ban of chlorpyrifos in 2020. And so really creating that roadmap for alternatives to that dangerous pesticide, right? So we were part of that work group. We've also, throughout the pandemic, we're very much involved in advocating for the banning of organophosphates at the national level as well as statewide. Chemicals like Roundup, and then also the pesticide alert pilot program. We really helped inform community, gather community to be able to give feedback on this pilot program of the pesticide alert system, and really working through a lot of the conflicts and controversies that were involved in that, right? Because we want to make sure, obviously, when there are these alert systems, that they are intentional, that they're actually doing what's intended, right? Not putting our communities in danger and the workers especially. And our recent participation is one that I've been involved in, is the CAC Community Engagement Work Group with the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, and that really helped put together some good resources and establish better relationships with ag commissioners is the purpose of that. And really being able to navigate and streamline these complaints when they occur. As we've noticed, there's, a lot of stalling, there's just a lot of confusion as to how to report these different exposures to pesticides. And so this group, I really have hope that the progress is gonna improve the situation, especially the relationships with ag commissioners. And we can move to the next one, please. And so another thing that Líderes Campesinas has done throughout the last many years is trying to build these relationships with county ag commissioners. Sometimes that's a difficult task, especially when you're out there protesting things and really going against some of the things that these ag commissioners are in favor of, right? So that's happened to us in different regions, but yet we've really made progress in other regions. And here's an image of Kern. This was just actually last week. And so getting together with our ag commissioners is very important, and informing them, right? Letting them know that we're here to help them, to be that bridge to the community and work together. And if we can move to the next slide. What we learned through COVID-19, the pandemic, was the importance of having something concrete. And so what we helped create were these advisories in different regions, and we really advocated for these to be done. We would learn from one county and advocate, for instance, in Sonoma for them to also create one, or in Kern County to create an advisory to protect workers from COVID-19. And so something like this really being, I guess, sort of consistent throughout the state is something that we would love to see in regards to pesticides advisories and whatnot. And you can move to the next slide. Something that we did as well during the pandemic was partnering with local clinicians, right? We all know that the pandemic showed us more than anything has lately that everyone deserves health care, that one person's health is going to affect the others, right? And so we're definitely, always pushing for healthcare for all, especially our essential workers. So what we had to do is really take clinicians out to the field. And we want to continue doing this work in terms of all the other longstanding issues, not just related to COVID-19, but pesticide exposure. So many illnesses that farm workers, have, and they're undiagnosed because of the lack of health care. That we also see that being, reflected in the statistics with the UC Merced Health Study. Over half of farm workers are uninsured. And so really making sure that we get farm workers out there, clinicians out there into the field, making sure that farm workers know their rights to be educated, that doctors know the impact of pesticides, the signs of pesticides, because oftentimes they do turn a blind eye when workers go into the clinics or the hospitals complaining about pesticide exposure. And I know that during the pandemic, we gathered with the California Rural Legal CRLAF, the foundation, with strike teams, including ALRB. And it was a shock to our biggest attendee there was Dolores Huerta. She has a strong voice and always has for many years. And it was mentioned that we were being doctors were being turned away from educating farm workers. And what something resulted from that, which is beautiful today, and it's also a reflection of systems change, is the CWAP program, and that's the California COVID Worker Outreach Project. And today, that's something that we're going to continue pushing for, is to actually be able to have intentional education in the field, in the work site, which we know counts as part of the illness prevention program. And so continuing those efforts is what we're going to be focused on. And you could go on to the next slide, please. And so this is just some of some more efforts on the side of advocating and building these relationships with different agencies, trying to be that bridge and navigating people into the complaint systems for various agencies. We're also working towards improving our food system, right? We know that corporations, the way that this huge food system is working these days, it invites exploitation of workers and an extreme use of pesticides. And so really focusing on a smaller scale farm system is another thing that we're focused on. And we can move to the next slide. And this is just an example of one of our projects, the People, Parks, and Power, is really learning how to access certain lands that exist so that we can engage more with the small immigrant farmers that actually do farm organically. And so we try to focus on solutions as well as the problem, right? And this is one of these solutions, is really helping small farmers have access to land, grow their food, and be able to be their own bosses and operate their own farms. You can move to the next slide, please. So this is just an example of some of the research that we've taken part in. You'll see the first slide of the image of the UC Merced Health Study, the Chamaco Study, which was a longitudinal study of pregnant women in Monterey County. We were part of the advisory board for that, and that's under UC Berkeley, Brenda Eskenazi, and it studied the impact of pesticides on pregnant women and their children. And then Watered Down Justice is another great one. So these are good, reports to look up, and we worked on all of these. And you can move to the next slide. So another way of lifting our voice is through the media, right? We consider that a form of bringing awareness. It is, it's various different stories. Some of them are regarding some litigation that we've been involved in, holding the EPA accountable. As we do work together with them, we also want to hold them accountable. And this is at the national level, and it's due to the dangerous endocrine disrupting pesticides. And so we've been still at work with that, making sure that those are banned. And then just the different stories and effects, making sure that people are aware of what happens, right, with farm workers. And also it's important that we know that we have to preserve our labor force, because many of them, somebody mentioned, they flee to Mexico because that's where people can get their health taken care of or addressed. And so we want to definitely preserve our workforce too. And we can move to the next slide. And so lifting our voices in the community, we do artivism throughout the state, decorating satchels. We call it the Morralitos campaign, and just with different messages about pesticide dangers and whatnot. And also, any kind of demonstrations that we can take part in, we will definitely work with our allies, community-based organization partners, and to get messages across. So we can move to the next thing. And just an example, I know Celia, we got to meet virtually, and so it's nice to see her today in person. We're a part of this work group where this resource page, one pager, was created, and that's a great resource for farm workers to be able to get more information about how to, contact their county ag commissioners, and how to make any complaints related to pesticide exposure. And then the other one is just something that Líderes Campesinas created to bring awareness. And so that's another way, is making sure we get the information out there to the community, right? So we can move to the next slide. And that's some of our team in Santa Maria, and thank you.
We have some information on the next slide too. Thank you so much, Irina. One question I had for you is just given the current landscape and some of your work that your organization did in the sustainable pest management plan, what do you think is kind of the biggest challenge currently with farm workers as it relates to pesticide? Is it education? Is it getting better relationships with ag commissioners? I mean, I'm sure it could list off a bunch of things, but
well, the biggest thing is just that these pesticides are still being used, right? And they exist,
and there's
really no way to get away from them. You know, the residue is always there. We just recently had some forums with vineyard workers, and they talked about the residue of I mean, it could even be like the sulfur or the pesticides, but they are constantly exposed, even if it's several hours after the spraying. And so I think, I mean, one thing I would love to see definitely is like more government subsidies for organic farming, right? And hopefully we can work on some policy related to that. But I think just not using pesticides and finding the alternatives and consulting with the professional organic growers or even immigrant small farmers that have traditional farms. Or just making sure that for now, right, these rules are really being followed. Because we hear about time rules that are supposed to be followed, but at the same time, we also are hearing testimonies of people that they're actually spraying during the work time, right?
thank you.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions for Irina?
Okay, we're gonna go to last but not least. Thank you, Irina, so much. I'm so glad that this worked out. Irina's been zipping all over this. Our next presenter is Bryce Lowen from Blossom Bluff Orchards. He is a member of the California Certified Organic Farmer Organization, and he grows organic tree fruits in Parlier. And Bryce, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being so patient with us.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be a representative for organic farmers. I'll start off by saying ours is a relatively, well, I think a very unique farming operation. We're on the small side, 78 acres of mostly tree fruit. Our newest experiment is kiwi vines. So we have a couple of acres of kiwi, and then the rest of the farm is dedicated to primarily summer fruit, peaches, plums, nectarines, apricots. And then we have fall fruits that we're producing right now, a couple of types of persimmon, pomegranates, and the kiwi. And then we roll into citrus very shortly here, and that ideally carries us through spring. So in a kind of ideal weather and everything else situation, we have something in production virtually year round. So that's not the norm, you know, for agriculture in general in the Central Valley. But it's what we do, and it seems to be working so far. So, but yeah, just to give a brief history on the farm, I'm fourth generation. The farm is family owned. My parents and my sister and I are equal owners of the farm. My whole family, including my two young sons, live on the farm within that 78-acre footprint. We have our own houses. We're not all in one big house or anything like that. But due to the way that the property was acquired over the years, small farms, 30-acre, 50-acre blocks were pretty normal not that long ago. And so over the generations, our farm has acquired neighboring parcels that had small houses on them, and that's the way it is now. And so, the fact of the matter is that we live in the environment that we're producing our agriculture on, and that definitely informs the way that we choose to farm. And it's a aspect of the organic argument that is often neglected, in my opinion. People, when they debate, organic versus chemical, I say chemical, conventional, whatever, agriculture, the main kind of topics of debate are, cost, efficiency, the health quality of the product itself, whether or not it's healthier to eat organic fruit or conventional fruit. The thing that's often not spoken about is what about the people that live and or work on the property, and that's a huge factor. And it's in our case, at least, it's the main factor for why we chose to farm organically. There's plenty of large entity organic farms or farming operations, mega farms that are thousands of acres that are able to do it organically. I expect that their motivation is not necessarily primarily that, but the fact of the matter is it can be done, and it is done successfully. So, I mean, whether or not pesticides are necessary, in my mind, that question has been answered. They're not, or at least not the harsh chemical pesticides that have been traditionally used for almost 100 years now. There's certainly biological and organic options out there that are extremely effective and that don't, endanger the health of the people that are applying them or that are working on that property that they're being sprayed on. So, it's been kind of an obvious solution in my mind for quite a while, that we can eliminate the use of these chemicals. There's some very big, very deep pockets that are lobbying against that idea. Chemical agriculture is controlled by, supplied by some extremely, powerful entities. And so education is a factor, getting people, for us even, my dad, when he took over the farm, my grandfather farmed in a more traditional, more conventional way before my folks got involved with the farming. And transitioning from conventional to organic was pretty scary because there wasn't a whole lot of support at the time. There wasn't a lot of other people doing it in our area. And when it was talked about, it was kind of considered to be a huge risk. So having to, just kind of face that fear and try it out potentially meant putting the farm in jeopardy or our livelihood in jeopardy. But he did, they did it. My folks did it anyways and found that, it's doable. It's possible.
Roughly what time period was that transition? Was it like 80s or?
The late 80s, early 90s, when chemicals were largely cut from the farm. We were certified organic in 2006. There was a period of time before that we belonged to an organization called California Clean Growers that was created, actually still in existence, I believe, but it's created by a neighbor farm friend of ours, Paul Buxman, who y'all might be familiar with, I'm not sure. But for the first span there, kind of because of that fear, largely the fear was not so much pests as fungus. Brown rot's a huge issue, and that's still, in my opinion, something that really needs to be. There could be a lot more done on the biological side to try to come up with products that are more effective against fungus. That'd be great for organic farmers. We're making it work with what's available, but some years, like this year, for instance, was really tough because of how wet it was this spring. And so that affected the summer crops even after the rains, and because of blossom blight and other things, things that occurred when it was really wet out there. So if there were more tools, more organic tools to combat fungus, that would make it easier to sell the idea to more conventional farms, I think. But from a pest standpoint, I mean, that's the stuff that's really affecting people's health, and pesticides. We've got some extremely effective biological methods. I mean, pests are not a big problem for us. We use pheromones. We use dormant sprays, which are even, standard with conventional farming during the off season, that basically, coat the trees with oil and suffocate anything that might be living on them. And there's a number of biological options for pest control that are very effective. They're not any more expensive, in my understanding. And I'm speaking, of course, from a position of I know what I know, and that's the tree fruit and now the kiwi business. So vegetable farming, that's a whole other thing to me. I'm sure there are complications there that I don't know about. But as far as the type of agriculture we're doing, I think pesticides are something that should have been kind of eliminated in a large scale by now. So,
Do you find that it gives being organic gives you a certain market advantage, or whether it be your products at the actual market, or in terms of another type of business advantage in terms of how you recruit your workforce? You mentioned you are small, but you do.
On both counts, yes. In fact, here again, ours is a weird model, but we do our own distribution. We've tried to make this business as complicated as possible for ourselves. So we grow the fruit, and then we sell the fruit as well, and we distribute it ourselves. So I mean, it's a lot. But having a quality organic product, and I mean, it's in demand everywhere. We tend, we set our stake in the Bay Area when we got into the organic game, and so that's primarily where we sell our fruit. But we do sell some locally here too. We sell at a farmer's market in Fresno, and we have a couple of store accounts and restaurant accounts in Fresno that we deliver to regularly during the summer. And yeah, I mean, as long as you're producing quality products, that's the key. Being organic absolutely is a selling point. That's what people are looking for. So on that front, yes, definitely on the market front, there's demand. There's only an increase in demand over the past 20 years, and I expect it's going to continue that way. From a worker comfort standpoint, our farm is, because of the kind of bizarre way that we operate, we have 150-ish varieties of different kinds of fruit on a relatively small footprint. So that means that things are pretty erratic, and keeping up with keeping the weeds down, and getting everything easy to maneuver through is a challenge, and we do our best. But there are times when our workers are like not real happy with the height of the weeds, because in early mornings they're getting their pants wet and they don't like it. So we try to do our best to stay ahead of that. That said, they stick around, and they seem to like working for us. I think largely because they know that they're safe breathing the air that they're working in and dealing with the soil that they're working in. So I mean, yeah, I'm kind of often surprised how not often surprised, but I think we're a good employer to work for. I think we treat people well. But beyond that, the conditions are weird, and they seem to roll with it, I think, because they appreciate, a little bit of what there is. And another thing that we have to do is, because of the many varieties we have, we'll say, start the day here. Next, after break, you're going to be on the other side of the farm, so I have to move everything over there. It's not a real cookie cutter type of job like it is in a lot of ag, where you got 20 acres of this peach, so you start here, and by the time you're done, you're done. But I don't know. I mean, for whatever reason, we're able to keep people happy, and they keep coming back. So it seems to be working.
Great. And then one thing I'm wondering if you can touch on, I know there are different state and federal programs that provide the industry in general with technical assistance or subsidies or kind of funding for various projects. Is there anything that your business is able to take advantage of that helps support organic farming and or kind of using more sustainable pest management practices?
I don't know that we've had the opportunity to take advantage of many organic specific programs. We have had had grants that have helped us upgrade our irrigation system, which is great, and develop our some of our ag wells that needed work. There's the tractor cash for clunkers type of program for tractors that we've taken advantage of, and that's all very much, you know, necessary and appreciated. There isn't a whole lot of organic specific grants out there that I'm aware of, and that would be great. You know, anything to, and another thing about organic farming, because of the nature of the beast, we need more labor than, and that's one of the reasons a lot of folks don't want to do it. Is it's you got to hire more people because there's more physical work to be done. I think that's a great thing because that, you know, means that we're creating jobs and that's nice. There's a way to subsidize some of that labor cost. That'd be awesome, but I don't know.
Okay, I don't know if I have any other questions. Do my colleagues have any questions? And then I'll look and see. I know we're kind of losing some folks on the Zoom, but checking in to see if anyone else from our Zoom has any questions. And then I'll look out in the room to see if anyone wants, since I was remiss in doing that before. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your participation, and thank you to all of our panelists as well. Really appreciate it. And with that, as I mentioned earlier, our reception is at our Visalia office, and I believe we're going to put up the flyer from 5:30 to 7:30. All are welcome. There'll be light refreshments and food there as well, and you can meet and talk to some of our staff. And yeah, that concludes our meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
And the address is up here on the screen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How do you, I saw Emma that about banning kilo. Soil. What do you do for the soil?
So I mean, our process, and I think for most organic, and that's what we do. And that's for tree fruit. That's not unreasonable, but I would imagine crop rotation or something like that would be the way to go for row crop. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's another sticking point for some people. Like there's any organic option that I've heard of. I wouldn't let them do that anyway. It's part of organic soil. So yeah.
So it's like, whatever it is.
You know, given, this is yours, right? That little one there? Yeah. So given some time,